Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We have just had a massive earthquake strike off the coast of Kamchatka. This is Russia. This was a magnitude 7.8 earthquake. It just hit in the past 90 minutes or so as I am live right now reporting on this at a depth currently of 10 kilometers. We'll see if that depth estimate changes as they get more data. But this is the latest in a string of powerful earthquakes here in this location. This has been the most seismically active part of the globe since 2011. And that was the Great Tohoku earthquake, 9.1 magnitude here. And that was the last big, extreme release of seismic energy in the globe, accompanied by many aftershocks that lasted months afterwards. The reason why is we've had three magnitude 7s now, a 7.4, then also a 7.4, and now this 7.8. But we also had, of course, that magnitude 8.8 megashock, which is, or megaquake, which is the sixth strongest earthquake ever observed with modern seismological recording stations and everything. We can turn on these other magnitude 7s and also the magnitude 8.8 right here. So we see this cluster. And there's also been a lot of magnitude 6 aftershocks, a bunch, uncountable number of effectively magnitude 5s, and of course going all the way down. So this area has been incredibly active this year. And there seems to have been two things at play with this. A, there's certainly a clear correspondence in time with earthquake activity here and what is happening on the sun, which is why the thumbnail is, did the sun do it, or like the sun did it, because we've been having these coronal hole high-speed streams, which there is a lot of research on, them being connected to earthquakes, especially when they continuously load the earth with energy. To give you just a quick sense of what a coronal hole is, it's this thing right there. That's a big coronal hole on the sun. We have another one forming there. This is our most recent imagery going from the 14th of September up to today. So we do have this next one to sweep by. This solar maximum has been a little weird because we've had so many of these coronal holes during the maximum phase. Typically these pop up during the descending phase and during solar minimum. But instead, we've been having a bunch of these coronal holes, areas in the outermost atmosphere of the sun, the solar corona, deficient in plasma. So there's lower plasma density, therefore the plasma temperature is lower, the magnetic field extends out to space and can connect directly to the other planets in the inner solar system, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Because normally these magnetic fields, you see these coronal loops actually, very powerful magnetic fields around a sunspot. This can be hundreds or thousands of Gauss, which is a unit of measurement. But normally they kind of loop back in. These magnetic fields are more confined and clustered. And actually each sunspot's like a little magnetic vortex. But a coronal hole is definitely a different dynamic where the magnetic field extends out, but in a significant way with strength, and can connect directly to the interplanetary environment, which, well, the planets are zooming through. And so we have this clear connection between coronal hole high-speed stream impacts, low solar wind density, which they which they create because they're low density. So they're accelerating these ions at high speed, and this creates a bit of a vacuum. And then it seems right during and after we have that solar wind vacuum sweep by us, we get these big quakes, magnitude 6 plus, 7 plus, 8 plus. Keep in mind, earthquakes scale in a very interesting way. So a magnitude 7 earthquake is 32 times more energy released than a magnitude 6 earthquake. Each magnitude jump follows that trend. So magnitude 7.8 earthquake is big, but this is 1/32th the energy of what was released with that magnitude 8.8 megaquake, which we have again right here. So these are all the magnitude 7s. Okay, we have that space weather factor. We're going to talk about that. There is a tsunami advisory in effect right now, primarily for the immediate location around this epicenter, also for some of the Aleutian Islands here, Alaska. We had a tsunami that was generated from the magnitude 8.8. It did ripple across the Pacific, but thankfully it wasn't that high of an amplitude of a wave. So that's a good thing. Whereas previously that had been more destructive in the past because there was a magnitude 9 there in 1952. And well, that created a stronger tsunami wave, but the difference between a magnitude 8.8 and a magnitude 9 is quite significant. It's like magnitude 9 is like 2 times the strength of a magnitude 8.8. So you'd think that the tsunami wave would be bigger. Though it also depends on the local dynamics, like how the plates, how they ruptured and the uplift and everything happening at depth in the ocean there. But the other thing that's happening with this is that there's been this interesting kind of like resonance between these earthquakes in Kamchatka and also these earthquakes that we have south of South America. So we've had a lot more in Russia, but it hasn't been completely like unanswered, because this location here is approximately the antipode for Kamchatka and vice versa. So the biggest earthquakes that we've had, excluding one, the magnitude 7.7 earthquake that hit Burma, Myanmar, Thailand, that area, on March 28th, 29th of this year, excluding that one magnitude 7.7, these are the strongest earthquakes that we've had. Also, a magnitude 7.6 Cayman Islands. That was also a big one. Everything else has been, for this like near magnitude range of mid 7s to 8s, we've had one magnitude 8 plus again, has been either here or also again up here with Kamchatka, and they are nearly antipodal. So there seems to be an interesting resonance between them. And if we go look at the list here, this is the 2nd of May. That's a magnitude 7.4. That was down Drake Passage, south of South America, right? And then we had this earthquake there on the 20th of July, 7.4, Kamchatka. Then we had the Megaquake July 29th, and then we had this magnitude 7.5 Drake Passage in August, and now we've had 2 back-to-back magnitude 7 plus earthquakes in Kamchatka. So almost leads me to think that we may get a big earthquake down in South America. And if this is working together, it's not just a coincidence, and I personally am not big on coincidences, I'm bigger on synchronicities. If this isn't a coincidence, then we would think that maybe there's an energy balancing that needs to occur, because the energy released here with not only these magnitude 7s, but also the magnitude 6s, the magnitude 5s, this whole earthquake swarm, and of course, almost a complete majority of this energy released from that magnitude 8.8 is a lot more than the energy released from these 2 magnitude 7 plus earthquakes, 7.4 in May, 7.5 in August. So one question I have is, are we going to see a megaquake down here as well in the near future, 2025, maybe 2026? I think it's now definitely a more distinct possibility than I may have thought of or others may have considered prior to today's earthquake. And I was actually going to do an update discussing this topic after that magnitude 7.4 earthquake on September 13th. And well, then I hadn't gotten around to it yet, and boom, now we have this guy today, 7.8. So that is a clear aftershock to this 8.8. Typically, the rule of thumb with earthquakes is that if you get a big quake, the aftershock will be 1 magnitude less. And after this 8.8 happened, I was like, guys, we probably have a big aftershock here. Where is it? And it didn't materialize. The strongest earthquake that we had after this was a 6.9, okay? Because we had this 7.4 foreshock, which preceded this earthquake there. And there was a whole bunch of anomalous activity, which led me to believe that we had a heightened probability of megaquake. And 3 days before, I put out a video. This is the first location that we looked at, examining zones of highest potential seismic risk. Kamchatka was the first place we zoomed in on. 3 days later, we had the magnitude 8.8 earthquake. And for a few months before this megaquake occurred, we had been forecasting that we were overdue for a megaquake and preparing for that possibility. So we've been tracking this on the channel. On the channel, we track what's happening with the Earth energetically. This is geologic events like earthquakes, volcanoes, but also geophysical energies. So for example, Schumann resonances, geomagnetic storms. We track solar activity, space weather. We just had a G3 geomagnetic storm. I put out earthquake watch as that was happening. I mean, I already put out that earthquake watch before it came in, because you can kind of forecast these things a bit. And well, we had this magnitude 7.8 today during that earthquake watch. So there you go. And then we also check out planetary resonances, what's happening to planets, the geometry, the angles, the energies of them. We also go expand beyond to what else is happening in our solar system, comets, asteroids, and also cosmic forces. The interesting thing that you'll note here, if we do a quick touch on planetary resonances really quick, this 7.4 earthquake there, September 13th, that was exactly when Mercury was performing a superior conjunction. So I can pull up an application here called Solar System Scope to show you the planetary geometry really quick. And I was also, one reason I was forecasting this space weather impact that we just had to be stronger than expected, or for there to be one in the first place, was based off of planetary geometry, because we had critical planetary geometry in the middle of September. In addition to eclipse season, the moon is on the ecliptic during new moon, full moon. Also, we have equinox, that's a powerful energy portal. And of course, you have, well, maybe not of course, a lot of you may not know this, but there's something known as the Russell-McFerrin effect. Because of the tilt angle of the Earth, there is a stronger coupling between the Earth and the solar wind. Therefore, geomagnetic storms can be stronger than they otherwise would be around equinox, especially during solar maximum and especially with the autumnal equinox in September. So that's the Russell-McFerrin effect. So we are getting close to that right now. We're basically in it, you could say. But here's our planetary geometry for the 18th of September. And if we just take our Earth here and drag it back to the 13th, right about there, and go like this, look, there is our Mercury superior conjunction. So Mercury, Sun, Earth. And the reason this is critical planetary geometry, because you also have this alignment with Saturn and Neptune behind. From a heliocentric standpoint, this is a pretty nice line. And we also had Venus and Jupiter there in an alignment heliocentrically. And there are other angles here as well. So there's like various trines and squares and sextiles. And in general, when you get these sort of precise angles to lock in, that seems to change like the cymatic resonance, the morphic field of the solar system, the cosmos, just the energy framework. We really don't know what it is yet. We have a lot of good ideas. Some of them are going to be true or partial true. Some of them will probably fall away with time. But we know that there's something to sacred geometry, to cymatics, these holographic patterns and just information fields and more. So the universe is holographic. It's fractal. It's all these things. If you study into this just a little bit, it becomes quickly apparent. So on September 13th, with that Mercury-Cazimi, that superior conjunction, we not only had a G3 geomagnetic storm roll in shortly afterwards, which is something that I was forecasting because of that and the overall planetary geometries in effect for our solar system, but we also had that 7.4. Now we have 7.8. So we can look at that really quick. This is actually right here an animation for that 7.4. They have not yet created it for the 7.8. They're typically pretty quick, but we're faster here on the live stream. But just to show you how these seismic waves propagate out, this is effectively from the same location, so it gives you a good sense. And this is an extreme level of seismic activity that we are in right now. Because again, how earthquake energy scales, the moment you get to like magnitude 7.7, 7.8, 8 beyond, you're at an extreme level of seismic activity taken from a comprehensive, summated global scale. So today is a very powerful day energetically from that perspective. And we see how these seismic waves propagate out from that location close to the Arctic Circle across the globe. And this is a powerful enough earthquake to shake the entire Earth. So the entire Earth will shake and vibrate from this for some time until eventually that energy fades out. We kind of see that here at the very end of our visualization. And again, this is the coronal hole that if I had to put money down, this is what I put the money on, this guy, because it lined up in time with all the other big earthquakes too. It lined up, this coronal hole is connected in time with that magnitude 8.8 earthquake and also with the recent earthquake Drake Passage. So we can check that out. And you start to get enough of these things lined up, it's like, guys, is this really a coincidence at this point? Like really the rule of thumb is 3 in a row. You get 3 or more things in a row, you got to start paying attention to it. If you're not paying attention to it and you're just dismissive, then you're not doing a good job. And you're just being belligerent. And you're just being dumb. And we don't want to be that. We want to be smart. We want to see what the world is actually presenting to us. Pay attention to the universe, the sun, the earth, the information it's giving, because we are on a cosmic journey. And if you have a straggler in the group, you know, maybe the group's going to leave you behind. So we don't want that. So let's go here and check out this graphic. This shows this coronal hole going back in time in its evolution. I'm going to turn myself off really quick, so watch my mouse, okay? So this is the most recent one there, right when it's Earth center. This is September 11th, right before that Mercury Superior conjunction and before we had the G3 storm, which came in on the 15th of September, early morning universal time. Here we see August 16th, we see July 20th there, June 23rd, May 27th, and you see that it's morphed over time. Did have a bit of a moment there in February. There's about 28 days in between each of these because that's the solar rotation period. So 28 days later, if this thing still exists, it will come back. And so you have February, then March, and April is really kind of the weakest it was, but then it really is now at its most impressive here in September, and we'll see if we get it coming back after this one for another rotation. But this has been active now for nearly a year. That's the point of, the main point of showing this graphic is that's been active for nearly a year now, because this is what, 10 different rotations, and there's another coronal hole in the sun that's done 13 rotations going back to October. So again, this solar maximum has been kind of weird because of all these coronal holes, which you can get them during solar maximum, but this is a big coronal hole. The other one I just referenced is even bigger. I have some graphics for that. Most of you probably have seen them on the channel if you watch regularly. But this is right before this most recent 7.8. It's also right before that 7.4. Okay, we'll talk about the solar wind conditions next, because this influences the solar wind conditions. And my thesis, you could say, is that it's the solar wind conditions that really pull these earthquakes out of the earth. The fault needs to already be critically stressed. The fault zone isn't under immense amount of stress because of plate tectonics and other forces. It's not going to rupture. But when it finally is at that critical stress, and then you kind of get this energy vacuum to form around the earth because of the solar wind, the low solar wind density, that seems to pull these earthquakes out. Well, August 16th, right there is that coronal hole, okay? So let us exit out of this really quick. August 16th, and this is when it was Earth center. So it was actually geoeffective just about 2 days after that. So we had that geomagnetic storm, the high-speed stream, solar wind impact after that date. So about the 18th of August or so. We could look it up specifically, but what I want to show you here is just with the earthquakes I've listed in here, we had that magnitude 7.5 Drake passage on the 22nd of August. So let's scroll down there really quick, and I don't know, maybe I can actually just click it. Look at that. Normally I don't like that feature, but there we go. Look at that, August 22nd. So the last time that coronal hole hit us, just a couple days afterwards, we had this magnitude 7.5. And that's one of the biggest earthquakes that we've had this year. Let us go back to this, our favorite graphic here. Okay, July 20th. Well, what happened after July 20th? We actually had that 7.4 earthquake in Russia, July 20th. And then on the 29th, we had the Megaquake. So we can go back here to our Google Earth where I've layered these in. And here is July 29th, and here's our Megaquake color there in dark red. So after we had that occur, we had just a few days after, we had, boom, that Megaquake. So the three biggest earthquakes that we have had over the past 3 months have all lined up with this big coronal hole. It wasn't nebulous like it was over here. These were well-defined coronal holes right in the trans-equatorial region, meaning that it's sweeping by the Earth, hitting the Earth very nicely with its high-speed stream. Let me show you a photo, a graphic I created of a coronal hole high-speed stream so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about, because this is one of these primary dynamics that's important to understand as it relates to this thesis. And we just have to adjust this a little bit. So here we have this graphic. Here's the sun, there's the coronal hole. Again, this area of low plasma density, temperature, the magnetic field is open, and it emits this high-speed stream. And the magnetic field is carrying these low-density, high-velocity ions, particles, plasma out into space. So it's not that, it's also that generates a magnetic field too, but in general, the magnetic field is carrying those out in this structure. You will have this higher plasma density structure at the front of it. This is a co-rotating interaction region. So when these sweep by, you first get hit with a high density plasma wall, then this high speed stream comes in, the solar wind velocity goes up really quick, very fast, and then the density drops. And it's when the density drops below 1 particle per cubic centimeter that things seem to get interesting as it relates to earthquakes. That really seems to be the case. So we can go to our real-time solar wind now and check that out. This is provided by NOAA. Here we have the past 7 days. And let me layer in here our AP or KP index of geomagnetic volatility, which shows us a geomagnetic storm. And so here we had quiet conditions back around the Cazimi of Mercury, but then we had that coronal hole high-speed stream come in right there. That's the increase in solar wind velocity going all the way up to 700 kilometers per second at the beginning. And then I think it even went to like 8 or so. Let's see what this is right here. Spiking up to 750, even 800 kilometers per second right there. That's very fast. I mean, it can get faster, but not usually from a coronal hole high-speed stream. To get faster solar wind than that, you typically need a coronal mass ejection impact, a high velocity one too. So that was a very fast coronal hole high-speed stream, quite notable. We'll look at the longer term graph too. But you'll notice the density on the solar wind dropped out steadily afterwards. We had our G3 minus storm right there. This is a KP index 6.667. The scale rating for the KP index goes from 1 to 9. 1 is actually 0. 0 is like basically super quiet conditions. Earth's magnetic field, our protective bubble, our shield around the planet that protects us from space weather and solar wind and storms and all that, is basically very static. It's not vibrating. Well, when it goes up to 9, it's undergoing these huge oscillations like this. Like it's in and out, and there's a whole bunch of electric currents flowing, creating oppositional magnetic fields and constructive ones, and it gets really wild. Well, the 6.67 is a G3 minus storm, and the geomagnetic storm scale rating goes from 1 to 5. So 1 is a minor storm, 5 is an extreme storm. You don't get those that often. 3 is a strong storm. So this was effectively a strong geomagnetic storm for 3 hours with a bunch of G1 conditions surrounding it. We had 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 hours total of G1 storming around and after this G2 or G3 minus blip right there. But look at the solar wind density after that high-speed stream came in. Notice how the solar wind density gets very low. We're below 1 here. We're kind of oscillating in between 0 and 1. Most of these values there are below 1. Well, we just started to come out of that, right? And we're still basically in it. But we really dropped out here on like the 17th, like basically 36 hours ago. We were really in low solar wind density. We're just now starting to come out of that, boom, 7.8. And that's a consistent trend. If we go to our 1 year view, let's check this out, because we got a lot here. We'll have to like kind of zone in on this. But you'll notice that actually the longer term trend here shows solar wind velocity going up because of these coronal holes. They've been so reoccurring that the like overall baseline velocity of interplanetary space and the solar wind plasma seems to be getting faster and faster. But this is one of the biggest bumps in this entire record there. So we can zoom over here to March. Let's zone in on this one here. So let's go like this. That should do it. We'll look at our magnitude 7.7 earthquake there in Burma, Thailand, Myanmar. And so we had this big coronal hole high-speed stream come in right here. Look at this, going up to like 700 plus, 750 plus kilometers per second. And then we had that magnitude 7.7 earthquake right in this zone right there. I think it was March 29th. So, I mean, we could look it up, but it was right in this zone. So there you go. That's another example just from this year. Let's go back to our 1 year and look at our megaquake for Russia. Also, we had the same conditions for the Great Tohoku earthquake, magnitude 9.1, March 11, 2011. You can load this up yourself. There's a link in the video description. You can play around with it. You can see what I'm talking about. Same deal roughly with the magnitude 9. I think it was December 28th or 26th maybe of 2004, the Great Sumatra quake that had that devastating tsunami. But we can go to July here. We'll zone in on this range. Let's see what we get. And the 29th of July, and that earthquake came in, for the megaquake came in at the very end of the 29th of July universal time. It's like 23:24 or something like that. So we see that we had this high-speed stream impact right here. We went up to 700 plus kilometers per second, which is quite fast. We see that we had a period there where the solar wind density was low. No, it was kind of average, let's say 1.3 or so. Some values below 1, that really seems to be kind of the key. And then right here, it really dropped off again. So right in this zone, there was a whole bunch of time periods, especially like right there, right here, where that solar wind density really dropped, and then boom, we had that megaquake. So this is just like a reoccurring thing. Happens over and over again, and it seems to be an earthquake generator because the reoccurring factor of it is, I think, key, where it's constantly loading the earth with energy. And once it reaches a breaking point, you start to get these things pop off. So we're just seeing this global seismic activity for the year be quite intense. Here we have it for the past 90 days provided by Volcano Discovery. And this is our megaquake zone. We were forecasting a long earthquake watch for this. Well, look at what happened. Here's the reality, folks. And then also put out various earthquake watches in this zone. And this earthquake, for example, the 7.5 south of Drake and Drake Passage, south of South America on the 22nd of August, that one hit just like 2 days or so after I put out earthquake watch. So it was a little delayed, but I was expecting there to be a magnitude 7 basically in the zone. It happened. And then we also put out earthquake watch right in this zone there. And well, now we have a 7.8. So it's just in general, this year is a very active year for earthquakes. One of the strongest years ever on record. And solar maximum in these coronal holes seem to be really feeding that. So there's just a tremendous amount happening. Here is our tsunami advisory. Let's see if this has been updated. I don't expect the tsunami to be really all that intense from this if there is one that's generated. It's just an advisory right now. It's not a threat or like a warning. Let's just, they have put out some updates here. Let's see what it says for Hawaii, because Hawaii's right in the middle of the Pacific. And the 8.8 magnitude quake did not result in a significant tsunami for Hawaii. Like it hit, but it wasn't devastating or anything like that, thankfully. So based on all available data, a destructive Pacific-wide tsunami is not expected, and there is no tsunami threat to Hawaii. Repeat, a destructive Pacific-wide tsunami is not expected, and there is no tsunami threat to Hawaii. This will be the final statement issued for this event unless additional data are received. So that is what we got. So that is very good news as it relates to a tsunami warning. And that's, again, the geologic factors vary between quakes, but if the magnitude 8.8 quake, 32 times more energy, isn't going to result in a super destructive tsunami that time, unlikely that this one, which is 32 times less energy, will do so. And we've had these other magnitude 7s, as I mentioned, in that region, and they haven't resulted in tsunamis of concern. So here is our USGS latest earthquakes map. And we can see this 7.8 here. There's already been quite a lot of aftershocks, as you can tell. And we're going to change this to look at earthquakes for all of 2025. But there has been some weird activity in this zone because we had the magnitude 8.8. And then the earthquake swarm shifted down, like it really shifted to the south-southwest after that magnitude 8.8. But now the aftershocks are shifting back to the north. If I go to Google Earth, you will see what I'm talking about. Here is the foreshock to the magnitude 8.8 quake. So it was to the north. Then we had this 8.8 quake there. Again, most of the earthquake swarm activity, the 6s, the 5s that have been continuing up till just this month, they were mostly to the south. And now we've had this 7.4 earthquake on the 13th of September up here, and then the 7.8 up there. So there's been this interesting dynamic where we had most of it go south-southwest, and now it's going to the north, almost exactly to the north perfectly. But at this point, it should be done. At this point, the seismic energy release should be good, should be basically over, because that 7.8 is 1 magnitude less than 8.8, should be over. But we don't know. It could keep going. This has been odd. Again, there was a magnitude 9 there in 1952. You need 2 magnitude 8.8s to equal 9. And so if that is the total amount of energy that's built up, then maybe we see a low magnitude 8 in this region, because this area just naturally is always hitting a magnitude 9 every 70 years or so. Maybe that's just the reoccurrence interval roughly. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but we should be done with earthquakes there after the 7.8. That's the most likely outcome, I would say. But the bigger thing now in my mind is, okay, what about this antipode location? Because you have had 2 of the biggest earthquakes for the year in this zone, 7.4 and 7.5, and they've been staggered. Again, we had this in May, and then we had a whole bunch of earthquakes in Kamchatka in July, and then you had this one in August, and now we had the Kamchatka earthquakes in September. And so can we expect an earthquake here, maybe October, November, when we have all these interstellar objects getting close to the sun? 3I Atlas, we have Comet C 2025, R2 Swan, only 0.25 astronomical units away from the sun during the superior conjunction of 3I Atlas on October 21st. 3I Atlas says it's perihelion on the 29th of October. There seems to be a bit of evidence suggesting that these things, when they get close to the sun, comets or interstellar objects, whatever, they seem to maybe provoke earthquake activity. Back with the Oumuamua 2017, we had the biggest X-class flares of solar cycle 24 right around the perihelion on both sides of Oumuamua's perihelion, which was September 9th. And then there was also the biggest earthquake of 2017, magnitude 8.2 in Mexico, within like 36 hours of that perihelion. So there is a connection between these things and earthquakes and solar activity. And that's even what they say in the Bible, right? Even in the Bible, they talk about the earthquakes and things in the sky and solar activity and more. And I'm by no means a Bible expert, but they talk about that. And if this is written to some degree based off of an accumulation of knowledge across time, and our ancestors weren't completely dumb, they're actually pretty smart, then it would make sense that that would line up. So that is an area that I'm watching south of South America, and I would not be surprised if you get a big earthquake there in the near future. But it's really based on these coronal holes, I think, to a large degree. I think that's a big piece in this puzzle. So I've been tracking that very consistently now. I'll keep you up to date on that. If you subscribe to the channel, of course, we track the space weather, we track everything basically. And I also want to show you this graphic here. This is a global seismic activity level, and it's updated to yesterday. So it does not show the most recent 7.8, but we can see these other earthquakes for 2025 thus far. We see our others. This was also when we have some very significant coronal holes on the sun. The 7.7, that was from this coronal hole that stretched transequatorial at that moment in time. That seems to be an important component. If it's hitting that ecliptic plane, really sweeping by the Earth, seems to just pull earthquakes out of the Earth. And that triggered a larger wave of global seismic activity with a whole bunch of magnitude 6s and also a magnitude 7 there. I think that's, is that a 7 or is that a 7 plus? That's a 7.3, I believe. That was the 7.4 May 2nd in Drake Passage. So now we had that, and now we've had this bigger global seismic burst of energy that seems to be continuing into the end of 2025. So I personally don't think that we're about to enter into this sort of activity anytime soon. I think we're going to continue to see heightened activity like this. It's not going to be every single day, but it is going to be more frequent, these earthquakes, as well as big solar flares and more, because of a lot of the factors that I'm tracking: planetary resonances, these comets and interstellar objects, and just the energy of 2025 at an archetypal level is speaking to new beginnings and big disruptions, death, rebirth, and more. So yeah, looking at this from a multifaceted perspective, it looks like things are going to continue to heat up. So that is the latest update I have for you on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. A big boom shakalaka today. That was what happened. If you'd like to get your boom shakalaka on, let me show you how to do that. You can go to earthevolution.com, and there's an e-store there. We also have an energy portal. This is the energy analytics webpage. It's linked in the video description, where you can track all these things yourself. So I would highly recommend, if you want to track this stuff, planetary resonances, solar activity, more, the earthquake activity level, you can bookmark this page, set it to open up every time you load up your web browser on your laptop or something, just to stay up to date. But we also have these Boom Shakalaka t-shirts, and I'm wearing the yellow one today for the sun. And so it says Earth Evolution on the front, and then the back has the Boom Shakalaka logo. These are available for everyone in the United States in watermelon and also in banana color. So make sure you eat your bananas. Potassium is very good for you. But there's other things in the store as well I recommend you check out if you're interested. We have tea blends, some merch, crystals. We have an Interstellar 3i Atlas long sleeve shirt now, which I absolutely love. It's this is my father's artwork on the back, which he paints with soil pigment. So he finds interesting soils and dirts and extracts the pigment out of them and paints with that. And being a geo guy and a little bit of a hippie, I absolutely love that. Super cool. So we took that artwork design, put it on the back, 3i Atlas on the front. This is great for the fall because it is 100% cotton, but long sleeve will keep you warm. So all this and more is available on the website. If you like what I do, this is a way to support me, and I also would like to support you more, because these energy events that occur, earthquakes, space weather, all this stuff can be very taxing on the body. And so we have a whole bunch of all organic, holistic wellness products here, all organic tea blends that we make and mix ourselves that support you with your health and wellness. So it's really about being mindful of that. And if you're healthy in body, you're healthy in mind, and then this aids in the self-actualization process, which is really the underlying factor and force here, is that there's this wave of increasing consciousness that is affecting all of us. So happy to help you with that, and I will keep you up to date with what is happening with the Earth. That is my promise to you. This earthquake popped off. I jumped on the live stream. You guys know the deal. So thank you all so much for your love and support. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all in the next video update. Thanks so much.